Apple A14X benchmarks. I am stoked to have a look at this, actually. They've been leaked ahead of the Apple event, which pretty much tells us for sure that Apple will be launching an Apple silicon MacBook device. So potential devices include a 13-inch MacBook Pro, 13-inch MacBook Air, and possibly a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That would surprise me. 16-inch MacBook Pro. I mean, the implication for a 16-inch MacBook Pro is that this is a performance device. The alleged Geekbench 5 benchmarks for the A14X show a 1.8 gigahertz processor capable of turboing to 3.1. So this would be the first custom Apple silicon to ever clock above 3 gigahertz. The GPU results show 8 gigs of RAM will be included with the processor, although we don't know that there wouldn't be other configurations with different amounts of RAM. It's an 8-core processor with a big little arrangement. So that means 4 big cores, 4 little ones. And for single core benchmarks, it looks like it's about, like 5% faster than the A14. Multi-core benchmarks, though, big difference. So 7220 versus 4198. So when you're like outputting a video or something like that, it seems like the A14 that's present in the new iPhones has a fair bit of thermal headroom that can be unlocked.
I was gonna mention thermal headroom because you still have. Didn't you do a video a long time ago when you had a MacBook in like a pan of water or something?
Yes.
To cool it. Do you think these benchmarks are done actually in a realistic thermal scenario?
Yeah, I would think so. I think that whoever got their hands on these devices early, just like was goofing around with it and probably like accidentally uploaded it to the database or something like that. Like that's what I would guess. Whoever it is probably going to get in trouble because I would imagine there's only a handful of people that have their hands on these things ahead of time.
It's interesting. I know of a story of a person who worked at a mobile phone store. That's as specific as I'm going to get. And they get the iPhones usually, I believe, roughly 2 days early, so they can like set up their inventory and do all that other kind of stuff. And one of the boxes was opened, and the person was playing around with the phone, which is apparently not even like way that uncommon. But they made the mistake of getting the phone onto Wi-Fi, and apparently within 2 hours, the store was contacted.
Really?
Apple, one of their phones connected. I'm sure they don't have like detailed tracking necessarily, but they would have device IDs and stuff. And one of their phones that should not be online is suddenly online with an IP address of somewhere that isn't Apple headquarters or wherever else.
Yep.
It was like, I'm not going to go way too far into the details of what happened there, but it was very bad. I would say that much. So if someone's going to do this, so someone's not only going to just accidentally get something on Wi-Fi, but they're also going to go through and benchmark a bunch of things and do stuff like that. Unless this person is super gone, I'm going to go with that this was very planned, wasn't necessarily horsing around, and this data was scraped and then uploaded in a different way.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair point.
And I'm not surprised. There's a note here that says it is unknown if this benchmark is real. Apple Insider was unable to verify if the information is like legit, and that is not surprising because if you did this, I'm sure you'd want to be very, very secretive about doing it. So it might be legit. It
took a matter of hours for Apple to contact us regarding our developer kit, for example. And that whole thing, the way that shook out is Apple eventually canceled their call with me to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, which presumably was that. And what we decided to do was send it back to the developer before talking to Apple. Because if Apple, so the thing is, we didn't sign an NDA. We were under no obligation to, like anything. Apple wasn't in a position where they could threaten us legally.
Yeah.
Unless we had their stolen property and didn't immediately return it. So what would happen then is if I talked to Apple and they said, you need to send it back to me, and I didn't do it, then I could be in legal trouble. And if I did do it, the developer could be in legal trouble because they did sign an NDA. So what I wish we had done, what I wish we had done is run the benchmarks, then sent it back, then teased that we had it, because at that point, I don't really think there'd be anything they could do. They could bother us, like they could file a lawsuit, or they could file a complaint, or whatever the case may be. But given that we have no agreement whatsoever with Apple, and at this point, it's very clear that we will never have one, I replied and I was like, hey, so are we rescheduling that call? And just total radio silence. So Apple just doesn't have an interest in building bridges with people that they can't. I mean, how do I say this delicately? With people who aren't going to play by their rules, pretty much, is the observation that I've made over the years. There's companies that want dissenting voices and want to be told, how to do better. And there's companies that think they know better and don't want to hear from anybody else. And Apple falls into the latter camp very clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, even
very clearly.
Even their customers loudly complaining about that horrendous MacBook Pro keyboard. It still took them 2 years to fix it. It's like, how does this, you literally spend, I think they're in the top 3 companies in the world for R&D spending, definitely top 10. And you can't fix a broken keyboard? Like, what? There are companies that specialize in making keyboard key switches. You could talk to one of them maybe. No, you have to invent your own wheel, the Apple wheel, the iWheel.